All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. As regular viewers of my channel know, I've done a lot of New Jersey-centric interviews with various musicians from my old home state of New Jersey. I realized long ago, if I'm going to be doing this sort of thing, I got to hit Red Bank. So with that said, it's my great pleasure to welcome Mr. Phil Caivano. How you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, man. I'm a proud resident of Red Bank, New Jersey. I'm from here. I love it here. I ran away from home when I was a kid from here, but it's I'm actually very proud to be from Jersey, and I feel very fortunate as my life has gone on and my career has gone on to be from here. Some of
Yeah.
the stuff that you were just touching on briefly, before you started recording that, it's we had a lot to offer, and as a teenage kid growing up here, I was really fortunate to be on the outskirts of New York City a little bit and be able to I think about this quite often, and a few of my other friends who not only just musicians, other writers and people like that, how we were able to go into New York and be
Mm.
like these sponges, and we didn't have to deal with the day to day of it all, and those formative years, and bring it all back home and create our own things out here. And there's something really special about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, tons of great bands. Just with punk and hardcore alone, going back to the early days to today, it just keeps blossoming and expanding. So you've got the old school cats who are still doing their thing. I just saw AOD up in Connecticut, and you
It's
got the newer
great.
guys.
It's great. And I love talking to guys like you about it because the people who get it, there was this underground culture here.
Right.
And when people think of Jersey, and I always say this, and it's not to knock anything and stuff like that. Everybody is like, Springsteen, Bon Jovi, this, that, and the other thing, which is like, I respect the people, I respect everything. I love Bruce, you know what I mean? How could I not? Nebraska is such a phenomenal record. And
Oh
I
yeah.
was when I was a real young kid, my dad had a friend who had a like this like kind of hippie, late 60s store down on West End and down by on Brighton Avenue, right? West End Avenue by the beach of Brighton. And I didn't know it, but Springsteen was there all the time, hanging out with my dad's buddy, and we'd go see these shows. And like so that was a very big influence on me as a little kid, that there was a person out there. And growing up, my father being an artist, growing up around a lot of art and music and people with guitars and stuff, and that was definitely an influence on me, wanting to play in bands for sure, as well as all the other stuff. It wasn't just like a lot of people who talk to me, they always get right into the CBGB's Max's Kansas City thing. But like I grew up in a household where when I was 12 years old, I wanted to be Sly Stone. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like Sly and the Family Stone, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, like Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, all the folk culture and all this stuff was like around me. And so I inevitably started to drift into the music side of things at a very, very young age. So yeah, I love Jersey.
Right on, right on. Well, and again, as the viewer, my regular viewers know, when I bring on a lot of cats from Jersey, I kind of focus on the late 80s, early 90s, which is historically my entry point into music. But in your case, I want to start a lot earlier than that. I have a prop, and hopefully my filter won't screw me too much on this. It kind of doesn't cooperate too much, but let me see if I can get this in the camera. Boom.
That's it. I mean, that's like, five kids from Red Bank, New Jersey, um, having like finding a place to play, because that was the other side of it. In the At that time when I was a teenager, in the mid to late 70s, there really weren't a lot of places teenagers could play.
Right.
Um, it wasn't until after that. Now, the place that we found where we started going was, in 77. CBGB's in Max's Kansas City, right? Like, so that photo is actually from CBGB's. And I'll grab the book in a second. My friend just wrote, and you know, it was a real special time because we wanted to play. We were playing like school auditoriums, backyard parties, doing things like that, and like, we would play like a high school dance, and we'd be playing like Stooges MC5 songs and the Dictators and like Grand Funk Railroad, and then we throw in a couple Rolling Stones songs. So we wanted to play, and we started to write original music, and there was really nowhere around here to do that. Places like the Stone Pony wouldn't have us. We were too young. Um, and then as that evolved, there was that pull to New York City, of course, because the doors were blown wide open. And to be a teenage kid at that time, looking back at it, it was just such a special time culturally, not just musically, culturally in New York. There was a lot of great things going on, artistically, music wise. And then a lot of that, the artists that were around, you talk about like Herring and Basquiat and like all these other guys, they were graffitiing. And then the graffiti culture, the beginning of hip hop, and like all these things, we used to call it wasn't hip hop back then, it was like rap music, but then being old, like one thing about being old enough to see where a lot of that came from, like the street poets and things and stuff, going to Times Square and seeing guys on the street like preaching and things and stuff, and like backtracking to like, jazz and, it's all of it. I can go on and on and on. And a lot of that led to the era you're talking about.
Right, right.
I think everybody, I'll probably get slammed for this one, but like so many people just glamorize that time of the late 70s, mid to late 70s CBGB era and Max's Kansas City era. But there was other stuff going on as well. You know what I mean? And like, not to there was just things going on in New York and Jersey and everywhere, all through the country culturally, it was like um um and that was like my time there was really, really short-lived. And like a lot of the greats came out of there. Like who didn't come out of there that paved the way for the generation that you're talking about, that later 80s, that mid to late 80s was all really an evolution of that. Like people realize how important punk rock was, and I hate to call it punk rock. To me, it's just rock and roll. At
Right.
all kinds, people started playing a little bit faster. People started being a little bit looser. It was all out of just angst, you know.
And
And
it seems to me that in those days too, I wasn't there, of course. I was born in 77. I missed it entirely. But from what I can gather from people I've known from that era, as an example, we just lost James Chance yesterday at the time of this recording. Um, and a lot of the old school punk rock guys are really heartbroken over that. And you think on its face, oh, James Chance was a different scene. Not necessarily, because it was more of a mental thing. It was more of a cultural thing. It wasn't necessarily what music you were playing. It was you're coming from the same place I am. You're playing hard rock, I'm doing this, but we're all the same kind of in the same culture, in the same world.
well, and that's the other thing that a lot of people with the the folklore of it all and the glamorizing that time period, it was very, very small. And I read all about James, and like he was there all the time. James was there. He was the Contortions were awesome.
Yeah.
Teenage Jesus and the Jerks were one of my favorite bands. And Lydia is one of my oldest, dearest friends, like there was it was kind of like everybody kind of showed up to see different things and absorb and take from. And
Hmm.
that goes to what I'm talking about the culture of it all. But nobody was really like, well, I'm in this kind of band or you're in that kind of band. It was like, well, we're musicians and artists and we're all trying to do something creative. So there was a lot of support. And I'm not saying I liked everything, and I don't think everybody liked what we were doing, but I remember seeing him like every time I walked in that door. No, it's very something else.
Yeah. Yeah. I only saw James once. It was 2001. It was a post 9/11 benefit for the firefighters.
Right.
Had it at CB's, and it was an amazing bill. It was James and Billy Ficca from Television on drums, the
Hmm.
Flesh Tones, who are, forget it.
Yeah.
And some of the newer bands, I think the Star Spangles played, and James, it was just himself and Fred. I gotta tell you, I was lucky. I went to CB's tons of times, played there tons of times. That show melted the paint.
Right.
It was like I'd never seen anything like that before.
Well, there was that other scene that was going on, and like the other thing with James was like, everybody was playing guitars and banging on drums and doing our thing, and everyone's doing the thing, and here's this guy with a saxophone,
Right,
and he's confronting people, like jumping in the crowd. It was like a lot of it to me. There was that influence of the Stooges, and there was that influence of like how important that was, and people were making it their own. Like one of my favorite artists from back then is Suicide, Alan
mhm,
Vega, and they influenced that whole scene because it was more art. And then you throw in the underground open jazz aspect of it all, which was influenced from like the late 60s into the 70s, Glenn Branca and all this other
right.
stuff. It's just the doors just start opening and the water just starts flowing and the air just starts being like, you got to breathe it. And I don't expect like everybody to look at it that way, because I think sometimes a lot of musicians can be closed-minded. But for me and my friends, it was like, I wanted to see that shit. I wanted to go like, another part of that era you're talking about. There was a New York thing going on, ABC No Rio, where all these
Right.
poets and, poets and writers and artists, and it just is all evolving. And that was going on the same time as all this great music was going on, in that time period that you're talking about. And I saw it seep out into New Jersey, into Newark, into Pipeline, Studio One, and then we had the Dirt Club, and then we had the Fast Lane, and then we like all these other, one of the Brighton Bar out here in Jersey,
Yep.
the Show Place in Dover, the Show Place in Dover. They were doing shows as long as anybody. They were doing shows. I remember seeing like hard rock bands like Budgie at the show place in Dover when I was 14 years old. So
Yeah.
clubs weren't new. They were just venues that the New York thing and the California thing and the Detroit thing, these bands were kind of like coming out into our neighborhoods and doing more. And I can't speak enough about, like, I really did love that time period that you're talking about. Like, I don't think it gets as as much acknowledgement as it should. Like bands like Cop Shoe Cop,
Oh yeah.
The Insane.
Yeah.
One of my favorite bands of all time from that era was Reagan Youth, because it was like you could see and feel in the early Agnostic Front stuff, you could see and feel that like something else was bubbling, right? And then you had like, the no wave thing happening, the early Sonic Youth, the early White Zombies, and all these things started like kind of evolving. So to be trapped in this time warp, I don't necessarily do that. Like I like what I like, and I have these big spots in my heart for certain eras and genres. And there's also an unknown place that people don't talk about a lot, was right down the street from CBGB's, was Great Gildersleeves. And
Mhm.
Great Gildersleeves was a club that started to have more of the hardcore stuff before CB's, like Black Flag. Then you had the Avenue A thing. And of course, you have to throw in, when the Bad Brains came up and Negative Approach came out. There were all these things that like were just like this weaving of talent, pure raw talent. One of my favorite bands that I don't think gets enough credit for having a big influence on that time frame you're talking about is when Corrosion of Conformity came up.
Mm.
They were like, to me, I thought it was like the greatest thing I ever saw. It was like, here are these guys, from that era, from that time, from Virginia and all that stuff. And I was like, oh my God, these guys are great. And then you throw in, Nuclear Assault, right? Nuclear Assault. And like, oh, then you have the Brooklyn stuff going on. Lemoore started happening and blah, blah, blah. I could go on and on and on
Oh
about
yeah.
one of my favorite bands from that time, the Crumbsuckers. Jesus Christ. They were awesome. But
Yeah.
John, but Nuclear Assault, there was something about them that like I loved them at the time. And the when uh uh when AF started changing a little bit, I love that era of Agnostic Front.
Yeah, me too.
Roger, Roger has always been one of my favorite frontmen. And my two favorite back then were Roger and Dave from Reagan Youth, and that it all starts going. But COC, I don't think everybody recognizes when COC became more rock, right?
Right.
And but there was that era before that that was really really special.
Well, I think, you mentioned the Crumb Suckers. You just mentioned Cause for Alarm era
Oh
AF.
yeah.
I mean, my introduction to what's commonly referred to as New York hardcore came through metal magazines because that was the era of crossover. So I'm buying metal magazines as a little kid to read about metal bands. And I'm reading about the Crumbsuckers. I'm reading about Carnivore, because those bands had kind of made more of a metal direction. Thus, they were mentioning New York hardcore in the interviews. Then it became
Right.
what's New York hardcore, and then you get into all the earlier bands, like the War Zones and the
Oh,
Murphy's Laws and stuff like that. But for me, that came through metal. So, people are sometimes like, crossover, but crossover, I think, actually helped New York hardcore grow
oh,
eventually.
I agree with you 9,000%. And the one band that I really think that uh, you know, um, was the Cro-Mags. I mean, like the
Mhm.
Cro-Mags, when you listen to Age of Quarrel and you hear Harley's evolution from the Stimulators, and I was really fortunate to see that. Then all of a sudden, this kid who was playing the drums, all of a sudden, he's like this guy.
Mhm.
He's like, and that record, Age of Quarrel was such an influential record, and then the stuff that came after that, I think guys weren't afraid to bring in their metal influences to music, and yes, there's some hardcore purists that it's like it's got to be like that, but like, like even Jimmy, Jimmy's musical knowledge, Jimmy from Murphy's Law, his musical knowledge is so vast. I mean, the time I played in Murphy's, like Jimmy turned me on to ska and things and stuff, and like me being from my age bracket, like I didn't like it when the Bad Brains went Rasta. I was like done. I was like, what do you mean? I want to see this. I want to see I want to see the loud, fast stuff, and I want to, and when they became Rastafarians, I was like, this sucks. And they were like, no, it doesn't. And I was sitting with Todd and Jimmy and those guys, listening to stuff and sitting with Todd and watching the Bad Brains do that. You know what I mean? Like, again, it's like, how could I knock a band for evolving?
Right.
They were creative. Like the fact of the matter is that like when they went Rasta, I didn't expect it. Of course I didn't like it, but looking back at it, I was like, wow, that's some evolution.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I definitely want to get into Blitzspear, but
Yeah,
before,
let's go.
before we do, because I showed the Shrapnel record for the viewer who's new to Shrapnel to give kind of a brief history lesson on them. Shrapnel was yourself, Dave Windorf, later frontman of Monster Magnet, and you've been a member of Monster Magnet for about 26 years now. Daniel Ray, who I've also had the pleasure of interviewing, along with Dave. Daniel Ray, the great producer, Ramones, Misfits, Adrenaline OD, tons of great stuff, and Daniel's had this wonderful career as well. So it was really kind of a springboard for, guys who later became full-time professional musicians. Shrapnel, the single I put up on the screen, that was produced by Ed Stasium. the legendary Ed Stasium. You guys were, if I'm not mistaken, the first artist signed to Elektra Records via the great Michael Alago.
It's the
There you
first one.
go. First single, yeah.
Yeah, Stasium did this one too with Joey Ramone was there and Arturo Vega and as a teenage kid, you just didn't really realize you were around such greatness, just that it was fun and it was great. Legs McNeil from Punk Magazine was our manager. It was
Wow.
just fun. It was just like fun. And Legs went on to write Please Kill Me. And like, there's all these people, and John Holmstrom, and like all these people we were around. It was crazy. And then, yeah, we were one of the first bands that Michael signed to Elektra. And my memories of that are more vague than the early stuff because that was a little cloudy area of my life, but it was very it was an interesting thing that went on. Like looking back at it, we may have peaked out, and I think we got pulled a little bit away from what made us special in the first place. And we tried with the Electra stuff a little bit too commercial, and it just wasn't happening. It had been done. We were finished, you know. And that happens. You were kids, man. You were really young, and I mean, I love Michael dearly. He's one of my longest friends from New York City, and I really really appreciate that time because at the I was I learned a lot. I learned a lot around that whole Electra thing that I think helped me in my musical path and in my career.
What in particular really kind of set you on a straighter path forward?
You know that musicians and artists need to make art and need to make music for themselves first and foremost, right? And when you get too involved with the business side of things, for me, it starts to consume me, and because you get away from the I've seen it happen to others too. You get away from the pure innocent thing that makes you want to do it in the first place.
Mhm.
And I really believe that. Like that's one of the things I know I bounce around a lot that I love about Windorf, like we're working on a new record right now. It's just the guy just loves to do
Mm.
it, and we've learned along the way that if we write and play what we like, we'll be fulfilled at the end, right? And hopefully there's a few people along the way. There's always going to be critics, there's always going to be people who are going to say shit. We do it too, right? So I just think I learned at that time to always try to stay true to my beliefs, always, stay true to what made me do this in the first place.
Mm.
And it's my DNA. And there's always a lot of many, many times through the years, I've listened to the business people, I've listened to the managers, yap, 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 blah, blah, fucking blah. And at the end of the day, when I always look at it like we're a piece of bubble gum, right? As soon as the flavor's done, spit us the fuck out
Yeah,
and wait a little while and get another piece. And it's just the way the business is.
yeah. That exactly, exactly. It's about profit, always has been.
Yeah,
And if
that's all right.
something,
So about the Blitzspeer stuff, you wanted to ask about that stuff, right?
yeah, I mean, because that was kind of the next step in your history after the shrapnel thing. And for me, at that time, I was I was still in grade school in those days, but I was reading the old EC Rockers. There was a great radio station, Hackettstown, New Jersey, WNTI, had a Thursday metal show, and they were playing what was happening locally slash in the city at that time. So they were playing Biohazard's first demo. They were playing the Caroline incarnation of White Zombie,
Mhm.
and they were playing your live record before the album came out, your EP that you guys did at the Limelight. So I was hearing all this stuff at the same time, and it was killing me because I was just too young to get through the Lincoln Tunnel. you know,
Mhm.
to see these bands. So I was kind of living vicariously through the music because I couldn't be in the scene. That came a little later for me. So Blitzspeer was among really for me the critical entry point bands into what was then New York and what later became, my experience in the whole thing, whether it's New Jersey or New York. So, Blitzspeer comes together and oh, I guess relatively soon you signed to a major label. I mean, you were with Epic for the pretty much the entire time you were a band, except for that final EP at the end.
Yeah, yeah. So what happened, strangely enough, Scotty and I met each other at the Brighton Bar in Long Branch, New Jersey. And there was another place out here in Asbury Park that used, it was called the Hot Dog House, and they used to have like shows up there in this rehearsal place.
Mhm.
And we had a mutual friend, four-way he was from San Francisco, but lived in New York for a long time. He was
Right.
called Bad Posture.
Sure.
7 foot fucking tall, one of the best front men ever. The guy was just like ridiculous. So I had been out of Shrapnel for a number of years, did not really know what I wanted to do, and really kind of thinking about too much what I wanted to do. I was like kind of scuffling around, looking at watching bands and stuff, kind of, not knowing what my next move would be. And Four told me he was coming out to Jersey to do a show at the Brighton, and that I should meet the guitar player Scotty, that we would probably get along well. He was playing with Four at the time. And, I was like, okay, I'll take a trip out to Jersey. My family still lives, I'll stay at my dad's house and zip on over to the Brighton. And they blew me away. I mean, just visually, Scotty was shredding. And I'm like, who the fuck? And I wasn't really aware of that, of like, too much of the metal stuff, like with Slayer and all that yet. I had heard of it, but like I was more rooted in the downtown New York stuff. And like I said, some of the more alternative stuff, I was like really into the noise thing and stuff like that, and still trying to like, my influences were just a lot different, and so we got together and we started to write some songs. And then, I kind of like fell off the deep end because that was a dark time of my life. And it was some months later, almost about a year later, I got in contact with Scotty, and he was like, yeah, I still want to do a band with you. Four Way's kind of like, doing his own thing. He doesn't really want to do it, and so we put this band together called Like he actually called me up and said, look I got it. I got this idea for this band, and really, I got to give Scotty all the credit in the world, because he kind of scraped me up off the ground and said, bring a guitar. And I had not played guitar at that point. I was a bass player. And he said, he knew I had a guitar. He goes, bring it up to the studio. I met this other cat who plays bass. We're working on a few songs. I actually showed him some of the songs you wrote. And he goes, I have this idea for the name of this band called Blitzspeer.
Mm.
He was really into this comic book, that Nemesis the Warlock. I'll never forget it. And we started playing. And it's another very electric time, I think, in New York City, that kind of evolved, where like you had, Circus of Power, you had the Cycle Systems Hell, they had Warrior Soul, they had like all these other bands were in New York. And I had, moved to New York. I'd been in New York at the time. And so we were just again having fun. I finally got my shit together. I'm hanging out with this cool cat from Jersey City, from Union City. Scotty's from Union City. And we're just hitting it off. And Kurt Fleck, the bass player, was like, oh my God, this kid's so fucking weird. He's perfect for a band. And, we played around, and we were, doing our whole thing. Our friends gave us gigs, the Circus of Power guys were great to us. Raging Slab were great to us, and we were like, going on and on and on. And before you know it, one of the big things with Blitzspeer is Scotty, he worked there before I did. There was a studio in New York called Top Cat Studios. It was rehearsal room. And through that, I and Scotty got me a job there. There was a lot of other A&R people and stuff were like in and out of there all the time. And this Frankie LaRocca, who at
Mm.
the time was, I knew who Frankie was from his musical history. He was like, "Hey, I heard you got a band with Scotty. I think your band's great. I listen out the door sometimes. Like, I'll get you a demo deal." And he did. I thought he was full of shit. I'm like, "Yeah, that's a fucking demo deal." And so that was that. And he got the first, it was like for Atlantic, we did some demos, and then Frankie moved over to Epic and got us signed.
Mm.
Another thing, looking back at it, there was a lot of great bands, going around. And the other band that like, as far as the hardcore stuff that goes on, Sick of It All, were
Right.
like, that was around the time they were really blooming. And like, you
Absolutely.
mentioned Biohazard and stuff like that. It's really odd that we went straight to a major,
Mm.
right? And we were offered some indie stuff, but and Mike Schnapp was involved. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. And the live record we did at the Limelight was such a great venue. We decided to do our EP live at the Limelight and get a mobile truck, and it was fantastic. It was like, are you kidding me? It was ridiculous.
Well, first of all, let me just mention a bit of Jersey trivia for people watching. Frankie LaRocca, rest in peace, who had an amazing career in the industry. He's the drummer on Bon Jovi's Runaway. So if you listen to that song, that's Frankie LaRocca, not Tico Torres. Frankie plays on that song.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, and Frankie also played in David Johansen's band.
Absolutely, yeah.
Frankie was a session cat. Frankie was a very musical guy, and what a kind-hearted, nice man he was. Like, to give us, and he, looking back at it, I don't know if Frankie 100% got us like musically. He just liked us, and
Mm.
he was in a position to help us. And he got us involved with a great engineer named Peter Dennenberg up in Connecticut. And Mamaroneck, New York, actually. And so Frankie was just a good dude, and he kind of got it. He sold it like people were coming to check us out. It was like a no-brainer for him, and he was just a nice man. It was awesome. Very supportive. I have great, great, great fond memories of Frankie.
Well, you mentioned obviously, with Frankie's help, you got the deal with Epic. And I remember because I was reading up on all these bands at the time. And in the late 80s, very early 90s, definitely pre-Nirvana, pre-Seattle, pre that whole thing, there was this big wave of bands in New York who were getting major label deals. Circus of Power was already there. You guys get signed, Prong gets signed,
Amazing.
Warrior Soul, Cycle Souls had a major label record.
Right.
And I remember back then it was a lot of, congratulatory vibes towards these bands. Like you guys arrived. I remember when I was a kid, I was always talking to bands. Shocker, I still am. But I'd be talking to like the guys in Sacred Reich, the thrash band, they're like, oh yeah, we just got signed to Hollywood Records, Disney's label. I'm like, about time. Or I run into Ivan from White Zombie at a Biohazard show when I was in seventh grade. And, Ivan's like, yeah, we just got signed to Geffen. It's like, yeah. So there was a lot of that encouragement, it seemed. Whereas maybe a couple years earlier, like you remember the Warzone record when Ray B's is like, we feel that hardcore should stay out of big business and stay on the streets where it belongs. It was kind of a different vibe from my perspective. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, was there any kind of backlash, or was it generally very cool with the bands getting to that next level?
Well, there was like a very healthy, it's like anything. To me, looking at it, in my perspective was that yes, there was some healthy competition, right? And like you're always driven by what's around you. You know what I mean? And when these bands started getting signed, like, a lot of it's timing and a lot of it's like, you know, um, a lot of it's timing. And then the one thing that like some of those guys were right about keeping it street and keeping it independent. I think that's why the Seattle stuff, a big reason that got so successful, not only was the talent insane. And when
Mhm.
you talk about the Seattle bands, everyone from like Mudhoney to Pearl Jam to you know, the list goes on. Mother Love Bone, you know, and then you throw in Alice in Chains and you throw in Nirvana. Like you're talking about like insane talent at a young age. Our talent pool was a little bit different, you know, and I think why I say, you know, and then the Sub Pop thing, those bands were able to kind of stay under the radar for a little while. And I remember I worked in the warehouse at Caroline and seeing all that stuff flood in
Mm,
from independent labels, and even Touch and Go, Jesus Lizard, which came out of Scratch Acid, you
right.
know, one of my favorite bands. You had Touch and Go, you had Alternative Tentacles, you had all these other, you know, SST, you know, the Black Flag stuff, and then, you know, and then you had, you know, Dead Kennedys, like that had such an influence. The West Coast kind of had that indie thing where they were really just doing their thing, and then major labels took notice. Those guys already did their dues, right? Now,
Mhm.
a lot of the New York stuff, I think, was like some things happened too quick, and we all got caught in that whole major label thing what we were just talking about before. They were like, they saw the cha-ching, 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 right? And it really wasn't the cha-ching, right? They weren't able to let us develop. They weren't able to let us find the producers, and like and again, and you got to give the credit. Like, look at the one band that got majorly successful out of that was White Zombie,
Mhm.
right? And who was their A&R guy? Michael Alago.
Right.
That is Michael's genius. Is that because he comes from the fan background? He did it with Metallica. He did it with Zombie. I mean, the guy made records with Nina Simone, for Christ's sake. You
Right.
know,
Right. Right.
he believed in art and music, where that's what I think what they had on their side, that, you know, there's only one Michael Alago. You know, a lot of people tried to emulate him and do what he did, and they just didn't. I don't know why it didn't happen, but there's something to all that when the business side of things, you know. He let those bands do their thing. He let those bands make their choices. He let those bands pick producers and run, you know, one thing that happened with Blitzspear on our second record, you know, we had some bad luck with some lineup stuff, but when it came time to make that record, you know, Scotty and I gave the label a whole list of producers we wanted to work with. They all went on to work with other bands who became really, really successful. Scotty and I knew we needed help,
Mm.
but it got past that point, and, you know, whatever happened, happened. But, you know, I look at it very, very fondly. But, you know, that's what I think, you know, that's my take on that whole side of it.
Well, you mentioned lineups. I just wanted to clarify something. Is it true that Mackie played with you at one point in Blitzspear?
Yes.
That is okay, because I had
So
heard that.
when we we had been through so many drummers, and at one point, you know, I got to know Mackie and Scotty got to know Mackie from, you know, me being like downtown and a lot of the Cro-Mag shows and stuff like that. And we approached Mackie to you know, play drums. We wanted to record some stuff. I actually just dug out that tape, and I've been like, I gotta contact Scotty. I found the reel of the tape, and Mackie said yes. And Mackie played on a demo that we gave to Frankie. And Mackie played some shows with us, like a handful of shows with us. And what that did for us was kind of establish a sound, and
Mm.
establish like, you know, a sound of what we wanted to be. Mackie helped us form this sound of what we could, like, okay, he was just better, so much better than everyone else we were playing with at the time. Great.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Our mutual friend Drew Stone does the 10 questions, and one of the questions is always, name your top three hardcore drummers, and Mackey's always on, the top of the list naturally. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
phenomenal player.
And I have a few, you know, but I mean, Mackie was just so, you know, such a nice guy and easy to be around. He brought this, you know, here we were trying to do something, and Mackie was already established, and he played in the mags and he played in some other bands and stuff. He brought this like professional air to it. You know what I mean? And automatically was like, oh, this guy is bringing something to the table. And I think I may have been a little bit more aware of it because I had, I had a little bit more experience in that sense than the other dudes in Blitzspear. But Scotty was too. Scotty, like, I'll never like not acknowledge Scotty, Scotty Lano's importance in my life of like what he brought to the table. You know what I mean? Scotty brought this thing to the table that was just like, fuck it. I got a guitar. I'm this skinny, lanky motherfucker. I don't give a fuck, and we had such a great time. The times we toured, the shows we did, I was fortunate to get us some opening gigs for the Ramones and things like that. And we were able to parlay that all into a really fun time of our lives. These things just don't happen, they just, timing is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Another drummer I wanted to mention specifically because he's not here anymore, unfortunately. Dave Tritt, David Rat.
Forget about it.
Yeah.
Forget about it. Like, I used to go see Rat at Rat R. And when at that time before Blitzspear, I think I went to see them with Alago the first time. I loved Rat at Rat R.
Oh yeah.
And he was part of that whole other scene that we were talking about, that you brought up. And I was like, that's the guy I want to be in a band with.
Yeah.
Just a throwback. So unfortunately for David, and unfortunately for us at the time, again, it was our time had gone by. But when we started playing with David, it opened up a whole nother door musically, which
Mm.
I love that era of Blitzspear. I loved playing with David. David made me want to go to the studio again. David would be like ringing my buzzer, let's do it. And when he was open to playing with us, I thought he was going to say no because of his background and because of the kind of music that he was more known for. And man, what a talented guy. I mean, when he got behind that drum kit, I mean, he was as good as anybody out there. To me,
Yeah.
he's beyond the hardcore drummer. He had a swing, he had a feel, he had this bombastic thing. He had that like Bill Ward thing where things were just going to start falling apart and it just comes back together. He could do the Bonham thing. It was just David Rat. He was David Tritt. Phenomenal, phenomenal musician. And the demos we did with David were great. And the shows we did with David were so much fun.
Mm.
So much fun.
Yeah. I have a little touch of regret with David Rat because I mean this goes back to the ancient days of social media, like, the before time, the MySpace days. And I can't remember how, but somehow David Rat and I cross paths and we become, social media friends. And I at that time I wasn't terribly familiar with Rat at Radar. I knew of the band. I later got to know Victor, I got the bigger picture of things. But, I was reading this guy's posts and I'm like, this is a really thoughtful, interesting man. He had a lot of things to say, and I can tell the guy was just very genuine in what he was doing. So we would kind of like comment on each other's stuff. And then one day he emails me or messages me. He's like, I've been following your work, Joel. I really think you're doing cool stuff. I'd love to do a video chat and just sort of compare notes and get to know each other better. And I'm like, oh, that'd be great. And this is like the days of Skype, like now, we do 100 of these a day, but back then it was kind of a new thing in a way, it wasn't like it is now. So we set a time, and for whatever reason, he no shows. Something came up, and life does that. So he sends his apologetic message. I'm like, hey man, it happens. I'm raising a young kid at home. The same shit happens to me, like not a big deal. And then, it was always communicating over typing, but we never had that in-person video, and before I know it, years, life takes me years in the future as it does with him. I think he was out in Brazil or something at one point. And he passes away, you know, and I still see his posts in my memories on Facebook,
I
and I'm
have
like,
his I have a similar situation. He contacted me and we talked a couple of times and we talked about getting together and life happens. And before you know it, he passed, but he was a special character, man. Like he was a writer, like David was an artist,
Yeah,
that's the other side of it, that he not only was a phenomenal drummer, David was an artist. And that goes back to like, I like to be around artists when it
yeah,
really, I don't care what you're doing, and
yeah.
so it goes back to my dad. It goes back to my youth, like we were talking about early on. And when he came into the picture, and David and I were friends, we'd see hanging out on Avenue A and stuff like that. It's like, oh, how do I get into a band with this guy? Because he was that, yeah.
Yeah. And there is a 7-inch single with
Mhm.
the Dave Tritt lineup. That's when Blitzspeer became a trio.
Yes.
And I want to let the viewers know who might be new to Blitzspear. There's the live EP from the Limelight that's called Blitzspear Live. It's got cover art by Pusshead.
Yes.
There's a full-length album called Saves, which is, in my opinion, one of the finest records of the decade of the '90s. And there's a single with Dave Tritt on drums when Blitzspear was a trio. And those are the three releases. So of course the obvious questions about to come. Why did the band sort of run out of gas at that point after that third release?
After that release, so we had been a band, we did that release, and at the time, we became a power trio out of default, you know. Um, Kurt split right before like we had some shows booked. And
Mm,
so Scotty just looked at me. I looked at Scotty like, what are we gonna do? And once again, Scotty Lano, the beauty of that man, just looked at me. He's like, oh, we're not canceling shows. You're playing bass. We'll do one rehearsal on bass and we just got this, but three of us, he's like, I'm like, dude, I can barely play guitar and fucking sing. And I can't sing anyway. Like, how am I gonna do that playing bass? He's like, you're gonna do it. And so we became a power trio. What happened was, I think that we were all kind of tired.
mm,
And just after the epic thing of getting caught and the whole major label thing, getting dropped, and we wanted to go independent. We did that little EP, and we were talking to some other labels and stuff. And we just kind of just ran out of gas. It
mm.
happens. We just ran out of gas and we couldn't get any help. And there was some people like interested in doing stuff with us, and it just kind of never happened. And one day we were just like, we're done. You have to pay your bills, you have to do some things and stuff. So we all, amicably split up and we stayed friends and stuff, which is kind of like one of the things that like I'm really happy about my career, is that I have stayed friends with people that I was in bands with. You don't always hear that. You always
Mm.
hear like people become enemies and stuff. And I don't know what it is. I think because I learned how to look down the line a bit and realize at the end of the day, it's really not that important, and I looked at a lot of my favorite bands. It's like, you know, someone as simple as the MC5, right? They did three records and they were done.
Mm.
Really, you look at the Stooges, right? Three records and done. You look at like so many great garage rock bands, and so many great bands did a couple of things, and they were done. So, there's something about like running out of gas and no one went to be like, hey man, I'm done, and that's what happened to us guys. We were just done.
Now, to the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been a reissue of that material, nor has there been a reunion of Blitzspear since the time you guys split up in '93, around thereabouts. Has either of those topics come up over the years, and
We,
where do
we,
things stand with that?
well, we were approached at one time to do a reunion. And at the time, it's really funny that it was like the other guys having the idea and not Scotty and I. And
Mm.
by the time it started to get a little bit of traction, Scott and I got to talking, and he was doing his whole thing, and I was doing my whole thing. And there's that whole thing about going backwards. And, we just was like, it wasn't the right time for it then. There is, after all these years, I've been going through some tapes and things and stuff where I have the demos that Mackie played on. I have some other stuff that we did and some cool recordings. It's just a matter of like Scotty and I buckling down and deciding whether we want to do it or not.
Right.
Oh, it's like, is there a need for it? Do you want to do it? Do you want to put it out there? Sometimes I think less is more. Sometimes I particularly love the whole folklore. I'm a big lover of folklore,
Sure.
but the strange thing has happened over the last year is and it backtracks to the shrapnel stuff. My really good friend Allison Camerado just wrote a book called Combat Love. There's a whole big thing about shrapnel in her book. She titled her book off of our single. She was the one who, hey, do you have any stuff? I want to do a Spotify. We didn't have anything. I contact Daniel. And lo and behold, Daniel has like the master reel, not the mix down. So we have some songs. So there's some talk about finally mixing the shrapnel
Mm.
16-inch. So now I find this other Blitzspeer thing. So you know what? I got to get together with my buddy Scotty and see what we want to do with it. Because Windorf and Daniel, we're gonna do the shrapnel thing when the time is right. Not play, but release the music. It's just I am a believer that some of that stuff is just fun. And if people want to hear it, I think we're a little selfish to keep it to ourselves,
Yeah.
right? And I remember, I sent a photo of the reel to Roger from AF, and he's like, "You got to do that," And so, you know what I mean. So I'm open to it. So it's just a matter of like timing and getting the time to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, I was seeing your name a lot back in those days in the EC Rocker. And one place I'd always kind of see it pop up was in ads for the pipeline in Newark, New Jersey.
Mhm.
I've done a whole series with Emilio from the pipeline, sort of these epic journeys with Emilio about the history of that place. So when I have a guest on who I know came up, played the pipeline, I always kind of ask, what are some things that stand out for you from that place in that era?
Well, when we were playing in New York, again, there was always that like, the healthy competition from other bands. You're playing in front of your home crowd. You're playing in front of like people and like, maybe a booking agent is coming to see you, or your A&R guy is showing up, or it's a showcase, or one thing or the other is going on. When you went across the river, you could just be yourself and you're playing in front of just fans. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Not that there weren't fans in New York, but a lot of pressure got lifted when you were at the pipeline. It was just like a fun place to be. It was like rock and roll and dirty, and it reminded me of my early punk rock days. You know what I mean? It was like, here we are, and it just flies under the radar. And I remember the shows at the other Newark place we're talking about, like a lot of great, once you got out of New York, it was almost like, ah, even I remember when I getting in the van with Blitzspear and going down to DC, going down to Virginia, same with the Shrapnel Days, same with Monster Magnet. Once you get out of the bigger cities, you're just like, wow, those are my most memorable shows.
Mm.
And even
Absolutely.
and even talking, to Windorf about that stuff, we had the Court Tavern right in Brunswick. You know what I mean? Like, great fucking place. It was like those are the places I really think that even with Pipeline, that you really got to be yourself and you really learned more about what being in a band was really all about.
Absolutely. And we haven't really touched on it much yet, but we're about to because, while all the stuff's happening in New York during the Blitzspeer era and that whole sort of white zombie thing we were talking about, there was Jack O'Monahan at the
Oh,
Brighton Bar. There was early Magnet, Spine of God era. A little later you had, Godspeed and Daisy Cutter and like these cool bands. So I mean, I'm talking to you from Red Bank, So I mean, what stands out for you during that era
Oh,
down at the shore?
Jacko was awesome. As much as he could be a knucklehead and a pain in the ass, fucking awesome. Like, Jocko, he got, he was promoting shows and his band Dirge was great.
Yes,
I
yes,
love Dirge, Dirge are awesome. And, and then even before that was Mother Records.
right. Yeah,
Mark
Marquez.
Nesbitt, Mark the Mother with bands like The Worst, Public Disturbance, the X-Men, that whole with Bobby Kennedy and Greg, their first band, slipping my mind right now, Bobby will kill me. Um,
The
just
Burn,
so,
you know.
yeah. So that all kind of stemmed, and then there was a place in Red Bank that nobody ever talks about was Big Man West. That was a club that Clarence Clemens actually owned.
Hmm.
And a band called Tyrant, which was Mark's band. Um, and Ronnie Ace, who went on to do Ronnie Asara, who went on to do some other stuff. Their band Tyrant. So it was Tyrant right here from Red Bank. We had Tyrant, we had Shrapnel, we had the Worst. Then you go into Long Branch, you had the X-Men. You had what's fucking Bobby's band's name? He's gonna kill me from Mother Records. Um, all the Long Branch stuff, and then that stemmed into Asbury. There was another place that was in Asbury called Visions. It was a place that used to let those bands play. So Jacko kind of like the owner of the Brighton was this guy named John, and the Brighton was kind of like a dirty old man bar.
Hmm.
And it was like, okay, let's have bands play here. And bands started to play there and it started to like have like this scene that like it's kind of like a sister of a brother sister thing with Court Tavern. A lot of
Right.
like, so that's kind of where Windorf kind of like the Brighton bar shows of Monster Magnet were some of the earliest shows, and bands were able again develop, and the other band Core, the band Core. There was a lot of stuff going on here in the Jersey Shore at the time, so yeah, it was really, really cool. Jacko was great to have, and it was, hey, you got to pay to get in tonight. We got to pay the bands, but that was the beauty of it.
Yeah.
AOD used to come down. AOD used to come down and play a lot, There's the Lodi scene and all those guys, I know like, there was that whole scene up there too, Jersey was a hotbed.
Absolutely. Then you mix in people like Freddie from the Mad Daddies and that whole
Oh
scene.
yeah. Well, and then the other one was Russ from the band Underdog. Underdog was
Yeah.
from down here. I'm gonna Google this right now. Under like yeah, Mad Daddies,
Ripping Corpse.
Rip. Well, it's funny you mentioned Ripping Corpse because I'm recording those guys tonight.
No, no, really?
I'm working on a project with Scott Ruth and Brandon from Ripping Corpse have a new band called Temple of Bones, and I'm recording it.
Wow. Wow. That was another band, another one
That's
of
I
my
told you I had a
gateways.
session tonight. That's what I'm doing.
No shit. That's so cool.
Brandon, when he was 15, played in Dirge, and I was the first guy to record him on drums. So it's gone full circle.
Wow. Wow. Well,
Ripping
that's
Corpse, great.
cool.
The Beast, that was also Ronnie,
Yes.
Mother Record stuff. Mark Chesley he had an ear to it, that and some of those records go for Chronic Sick. The band was Chronic Sick.
Yes. Okay.
Um, so Mark, the Mother, had an ear for some stuff. He was we were all fans, and I can't talk enough about Jack's music right here on Broad Street. And Ronnie, Ronnie was always at Jack's. He was working there. Windorf was hanging around. we'd get all these records and open the records, and Mark was around. We'd have these music listening to parties. And, the other Jersey thing is, you can't talk about Jersey without talking about the Metal Militia. It all kind of like bubbled, you
Right.
know. Would the Metal Militia been started anywhere else? Yes, you had the West Coast thing. You had, we had Megaforce here, and then you had the other with Brian Slagle and all those guys out there. But the Jersey thing, kind of the old Bridge Metal Militia. I remember going out there to parties and stuff. There was something going on, man. There
Yeah.
was something happened. Johnny Z had his record store. We'd go out there and buy records, and every other weekend going out there, the Route 18 auction and blah, blah, blah. I could go on and on about all that shit.
And the thing is too, people from Jersey, they stay in the game. When I first started my career, I was working for a music magazine for Compact Disc World. Remember CD
I
World in
do.
Jersey? The Liner Notes magazine. I got my start as their editor when I got out of college, like back in the year 2000. And who's the first publicist I dealt with? Maria Ferraro. Who sent me an email 5 minutes before I got on with you? Maria Ferraro.
Still in touch.
Yeah,
Still, yeah. And another Jersey band that I'll bring up was Electric Frankenstein.
I played an Electric
I
Frankenstein.
know you did. I did my homework too.
I just talked to Sal today, actually. He's going to come on the channel in a couple days.
You have to tell him I said hi because I have a really good memory. I recorded a few songs with him at the show place. And I always felt that, I'm a big that era of music, when I got, around Sal, and what was the singer's name who came back?
Steve Miller.
Phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
And I was around Steve. I was like, these guys get it. Because I had been in Magnet for a while, and I had been in Scandinavia, and I had seen the Helicopters. I had seen all these bands, and I'm like, but these guys are the real deal. I always thought that the two bands I thought should have been way bigger than they are were Electric Frankenstein and Easy Action from Detroit.
Oh,
And
yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm a big John Brannon fan.
Me too.
Back to, Negative Approach, Laughing Hyenas, and Easy Action. The guy has not made a shitty fucking record. It's like
No.
almost like he's phenomenal. But at that time frame, Easy Action was in Asbury a lot. They were in Asbury Park a lot, playing a lot with Lord Sterling,
Hmm.
with Mike Schwagert's band, and Rob Ryan's band, and a band called Lungfish were up here a lot
Oh, yeah,
from
yeah.
um who I loved. And Mike, I tied that in because he's the guitar player for this Temple of Bones thing, with the Ripping Corpse guys. And at that time frame, Electric Frankenstein, like the timeline is there. And when I got together with Sal, I was like, this guy gets it. He's like the
Oh,
real deal.
yeah.
And I didn't know. And I had seen them a few times, and I really liked it. And when Steve came in and I recorded Steve, and I was in the studio with Steve, I was like, this fucking dude is the real fucking deal.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. The most natural frontman songwriter I've ever worked with. That guy can pull a song out of thin air and it would be perfect.
Putting a microphone in front of him doing vocals, it was like, I didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have very, very fond memories of that, and very fond memories of that time frame.
Let me throw a name at you. Somebody I miss from that scene. I suspect you knew him. Chris Berry.
Oh God. Yeah. Chris Barry. He was everywhere.
Yeah.
At every show. Great writer. Great. He used to live right up the street from me. He used to live in these apartments where I am, and I'm on Broad Street in Red Bank.
Hmm.
Chris used his apartments up there. There's these cool, like Tudor looking apartments. That's where Chris used to live for a while. Great guy.
Oh yeah, he was the best. He in the early 2000s, and the band's still around. I started a band called the Graveyard School, and they
Mhm.
used to play it. They used to play the Brighton all the time and stuff. And we played a lot of shows for Chris because Chris had that Broadway Central Cafe place. He booked the Pony, And that guy, man, he wrote about us constantly. He was always putting our name out there. I love that guy. And
Yeah.
funny thing about that whole thing, you mentioned Jacko and that Dirge record he did. Remember that song TV Desensitization, where he's like,
Oh
"Ah,"
yeah, yeah.
how Jacko sings. "Ah, ah, ah."
Yeah, yeah. It's like
So
talking to him. It's crazy.
when we would play at the graveyard school, when we would play at the Brighton bar, between songs, he'd be like, "All right, this next song is called," and some people got the joke. I don't know if Jacko did, but we would always
Yeah.
talk like Jacko when we were on stage.
Well, the other guy, like, so you mentioned Chris, like, why, in my time frame, why Chris was so important. The other guy would be Tony Palagrossi, right? So
Mm,
Tony used to book the Fast Lane, right? So having those guys around and taking chances on young bands and going to the club owners, we need a place to play. Well, let's just face it, man, the Stone Pony wouldn't let guys like us in there. We couldn't get in there. There's just no way, right? It wasn't until much later that alternative music actually got into the Stone Pony,
mm,
right? And it kind of like that's one of the things with being from Jersey that irks me a little bit is that the Pony takes all this credit for, oh, the Stone Pony. Well, you wouldn't have had any of those bands playing there if it wasn't for these other places and these other guys putting their neck out there, giving young bands a chance, like the Jackos, the Chris Barrys, the Tony Palagrossis, Johnny Dirt, all the list goes on and on and on. And the Pony just like, it's the Pony. Like, yeah, I
yeah,
get it, but it's not where we were going. And that was a big thing with us guys, is that like we always went north. Like the show plays and Pipeline and the Dirt Club in New York City. Like, we weren't going down the shore. We were going up to the city and getting that influence. There was really nothing for us here.
yeah, yeah. I know Chris Berry, bless him, got my band at the time into the Pony somehow, some way. As a matter of fact, he brought Dave down to that show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Chris was a special guy, and I like the fact that we can have this conversation because I can bring him up. A lot of the interviews, you know, Chris didn't kind of cross paths with a lot of the guys, but Chris Berry was fantastic, and Jacko was too. And and I know Jacko's had some ups and downs in the last couple of years.
Mhm.
Definitely want to send my best to Jack.
Yeah.
I was joking around earlier about his voice, but that dude. Chris Berry, you know, um, Emilio at the Pipeline, Doug
Yeah.
at the Core Tavern. These are guys who built this whole foundation during that time period in Jersey.
Yeah. And then you throw in another club was Maxwell's right in Hoboken.
Right.
Great
Absolutely.
shows. Absolutely, And like, I just like again, like starting it off, like I'm really happy that in my lifetime I lived in New York when it was great. I lived in LA at a really, really great time, but I always kept my roots here in Jersey and coming back. And like that was why when Windor had asked me, we always stayed in contact. And after, the whole Blitzspeer thing and then doing a few other playing in Murphy's Law for a little while. And then it was time I wanted to get into studio stuff. I was out in LA for a while and Dave asked me to come back and play guitar in Magnet. I was like, I don't know, man. I'm kind of good. I'm kind of good in my life right now. But there was that pull back to Jersey, and he was like, hey, even just do a couple of tours. And now it's like, well, you said 26 years later, it's like, that one tour it turned into 26 years so of it. But there's something about making music with one of your oldest friends where it's like, you know, our formative musical years, even before punk rock, were in those places like I told you about, So everything that I went on to do kind of all started in the same room with the guy I'm still in a band with. It's insane. You know what I mean? And like Dave used to come to the Blitzspeer shows and encourage me. I used to go to the Magnet shows and encourage him. I remember, I would always come down and get together with him, and we'd be up all night smoking cigarettes and listening to music and talking shit. Dave worked at the comic book place right down the street here. I'd always come down from the city and see Dave. It was always really, really special. So when I got asked to come back, I initially wasn't going to do it, because I was, finally financially stable,
Mm.
finally lived in a house, finally had a car again, and living very happy in LA. But when you get that opportunity, I was like, how could I say no? I
I
remember
know.
getting on the plane. I remember getting on the plane at Newark, and when the plane took off, I was like, I just got to get back to LA and figure out how to get the hell out of LA, back to New Jersey. So yeah.
Yeah, I get it, man. My very first band when I was 16 years old, the one that first played the pipeline when I was a kid, those guys, we still meet up every few months. So, I mean, we've been doing that 30 years. There's something about jerseys, like once you're in it, it's kind of like that cliche mob thing. You can't leave the jersey scene. You can't get away from it.
Right. And you know what? I think that has something to do with, like, we all, you've been, you're doing what you do. A lot of the New Yorkers, these guys don't talk. There's all this animosity. Then all these other bands, they don't talk. There's all this animosity, right? The Jersey guys are like, what the, we want to see your friends do good. And I actually saw something, you know, you actually just like one another, whether it works out or not. I think it's just something in all of our DNA. And like, I always break everyone's chops. It's like, especially all the New York guys. It's like, you guys, you're New York, New York, New York, New York. The guy who sang the song was from fucking Jersey. All right. So give me a fucking break over here. Right. And then when I saw a little, I saw a little something on Springsteen a couple nights ago, and it was an interview with him and Steven in their dressing room. And you looked at these two men and going, they probably have their differences, but they actually like each other.
Yeah.
And that's why they're still doing it together. And that's like, I look at Dave Windorf and I've known Dave since I'm 13 years old. We met going to a Lou Reed concert at the Felt Forum in 1975. That's insane. And all of our musical journey, all the different things. And again, like with Windorf and even in Daniel as well, we were friends before punk rock,
Mhm.
right? So we were friends listening to Sabbath and Hawkwind and Led Zeppelin and Grand Funk Railroad and all this, and then there was another record that was really big with us guys was the Nugget records that Lenny Kaye had put out, like all that garage rock stuff that led to everything. Just like looking back at my life, man, everything kind of makes sense,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like when you're younger, I think you don't really know it or appreciate it because you're always in the grind. Now I'm in my 60s now. You know what I mean? I look back at those times and really, really, number one, lucky to be alive. And number two, looking back at like all those little memories and all those little things and all the little people I crossed paths with, all the people who crashed on my floor, all the floors I crashed on and had nowhere to go. It all makes sense now.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. And I want to mention as well, you did a solo record
Hmm.
um, about a year and a half ago, I want to say, under the
Hmm.
name Caivano.
Hmm.
I'm going to make sure there's a link in the video description for people to check that out. That's a
Hmm.
great record. From what I've heard through the grapevine, there's going to be some touring with Monster Magnet coming up soon. Is that right?
Yeah. So Magnet is touring Europe in the fall,
Hmm.
going over to Europe in October, and we are working on, we hear it all the time, we are working on an American tour for the first time in a very long time, for early next year. And Dave and I we're really, I can just tell everybody, we're working hard on it, and we are doing our best to make this finally happen because we hear it all the time when a European tour comes up. What about us here? You know, uh, we and just to set the record straight, it's not that we don't want to play in America, but like, it costs a lot to play here. It
Yeah.
costs a lot. It's like, it's a big, vast country. We love America. We want to play in America. So we're actually working on it very hard to do. We're going to do it. It's going to happen. I appreciate everybody's patience. Um, and with the record I did, it was just something that came out of like boredom, with the pandemic. I really won't say boredom, but like I had time. I went through some stuff. It kind of started to actually bubble a little bit before the pandemic. And I dug out some riffs. I was, working on something. Maybe it's time to do a little, so maybe I'll do my own record, and I had talked to Wendigo, my old friend Raphael from Cycle Sluts from Wendigo Productions, who they also work with 10 Ton Mojo with Scotty. And it's like, maybe, and then I got busy with Magnet again. And it was always like, that's always like a lot of people always ask me about like, how come I've never done other stuff? And basically, I love working with Windorf. And I love the challenge. I love the creativity. I love being the sidekick. I like being on the side, I really do. It's been a great role for me. And I'm more of a studio guy than him. So I can listen to Dave explain stuff. He like him back at me. I can like blah 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 plug some stuff in. But I finally had the time to go through some recordings that early first year of pandemic in 2020 got me to write a little bit. And I approached Pantella, our drummer, Bobby Pantella, about, hey man, do you want to do this thing? I think, I called Raphael up. She's like, get it going. And so I did it. It came out, last year at this time, and I had a lot of fun with it. I'm still having fun with it. It kind of like, it's almost like I wanted to put myself out there, and I'm glad I waited this long. I'm glad I didn't do something earlier. I had listened to some things that I thought about putting out. I'm like, wow, thank God I didn't release that fucking crap. When you have your own studio, you can record and do whatever you want to do when you want to do it. And the stuff that I did, I actually wrote more. I'm glad it wasn't older stuff. It was more fresh and stuff I wrote the first year, 2020 and early 2021. So it felt fresh to me and I wanted to do it and made it happen. It's a lot of fun. I like having fun. I like to, again, it's like, I can't say it enough at like, in my 60s right now, still doing it, still having fun doing it,
Mm,
not being somebody who is always caught in the past.
right,
Oh,
right.
like, I love it. Like, I appreciate it. I love everything I've been through. Like I said, like, I go back to like, I remember going to Raji's in LA and seeing shows there. I remember going to the Cafe de Grand. Like I've been like very fortunate in my life to see things and be around things that, a lot of other people like wish they were.
Mm,
And I appreciate that so much, but like I'd have to say at this time of my career, I'm very content. I'm very content and happy, to talk to people about it when people have the curiosity to see my angle inside of it. You know what I mean? It ain't that I don't think I'm right about anything. I just have enjoyed it.
absolutely, man. Well, I
You know,
gotta tell you, this kind of conversation is exactly why I do this channel, especially when I bring someone on who's from Jersey. I don't live in Jersey these days, but I have an affinity for that state. I'm there as often as I can. Um, and like I said, Blitzspeer and what you were doing back then made me the music fan that I am today. So the fact that we can sit here in 2024 and talk about that and talk about what you're doing now, man, I really appreciate you coming on and
yeah, I
giving some
really
time.
appreciate you having me. When Drew hit me up and he told me, about, the time frame you wanted to talk about, I hope I got enough of that in there for you because, I again, I can't say it enough that like that late 80s into the mid 90s, I think is very, very overlooked. And when you look at the bands like Quicksand,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You look at all these bands that were around that we were very fortunate to see, and we saw, so many bands like the Limelight was great. One of the first times like Alice in Chains was in New York, and I remember all these times of like, the first and the Pyramid Club.
Mm,
Why is the Pyramid Club not talked about enough? Every bit as important. Like that was a Blitzspeer hangout, man. That was one of the, I think that's where we played our first show, the Pyramid Club. Like why is that? Why is it always got to be CBs and Maxes?
right.
A lot of other places. A7 was great. People talk about that a lot. The Reggae Lounge, the Brownies. There was all these
Right.
places, all the garage rock stuff, the garage rock place over on 14th Street. Like there were all these places that were really instrumental in the development on a lot of people's careers. And that time frame was very, very special. You're right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm happy to do my part and maybe, connecting some of these dots for
Oh,
some
man,
people.
keep it. And look, that's I really appreciate guys like you and Drew and other people who because like again, like I have a 17-year-old nephew who's all about it, right? So he goes on and watches stuff like this. I remember bringing him to see AF a few years back, and he was like, these guys? And I remember, and then I was bringing him to see it was the Circle Jerks, 7 seconds, and Negative Approach.
Mm,
Right. And we're driving down there. He goes, I goes, I like the Circle Jerks and Negative Approach better than 7 seconds. And he did it all on his own. Did this kid did it all on his own, right? And we're hanging out with John Brannon. He was like, oh my God. And then he met Keith. He couldn't believe it. It's the same kid who called me on tour and asked me if I ever heard of a band called the Bad Brains. And I never turned him on to the Bad Brains. So that why I bring that up, just him and his friends are starting bands. They're playing Elks clubs. They're playing VFWs. They're playing in rehearsal rooms and charging $5 to get in. There's this whole underground scene in New Brunswick again. You know,
right.
I never want to be this jaded guy who's like, oh, it used to be better when, like let everybody have their time. Let youngsters have their time. There's always going to be creativity and there's always going to be music being made, and everybody has to have their own window and their
Right.
own time to go through. And I
Right.
think hear some other bands and guys talk about it. I just keep my mouth shut because I don't agree with them. I get it. Don't get me wrong. I totally get it. Like Johnny Thunders is not walking in the room anytime soon. There's only one Johnny Thunders. There's only one Lux Interior. There's only one Joey and Johnny Ramone and Dee Dee Ramone. Like it paved the way. But though I really believe those guys and Ron Ashton, those are the guys who would still want the younger generation to develop and do their own fucking thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And it
You know?
definitely, it shows in like the shows that Drew does that at Jesse's place, the Bowery Electric, you know,
Yeah.
and they shows and the younger people are showing up. I mean, it's not going to go away. And anybody who's jaded and says, it was better back then, go out to a show today. I guarantee you it's as great as it was back then. You just
Right.
got to pull a little
And I
harder.
don't know, I'll run this by you is like, I think I'm seeing that younger generation and I embrace it and I love it. And I think it's fantastic. Where we had a lull for a while where, a lot of younger people were stuck on their computers, right?
Mm,
And they were just like looking at everything at home. And I don't know, man. And I see the timeline. They've done their research and now they want to get out there and do it. And now they want to get out there and see it. And I think those early days of 2020 to like 20, late 2021 and 2022, they were just locked into this thing. They were so excited to get out. I'm seeing people dressing and doing it and going to shows and supporting one another. And like these kids out here in Jersey, they're playing in 3 bands, just like we did. It's great to see.
Yeah.
It's- And it's and
Absolutely.
it's great. At my point, I like encouraging it. Get out there and fucking do it. If it's in your, people always ask me, we'll wind it out with a couple of things. People always ask me certain things. And like, my main thing is that, like, if you are driven to do this and you feel like it's in your DNA, you have to do it. It's creative people have to create. That's why I ain't gonna tell you nothing. Like, we're in a crazy time right now. We're in a crazy world right now. Let's let the musicians and the artists stick together and fucking have a little bit of fucking fun. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not getting caught in all your other bullshit. It never interested me. What interests me is what's behind me, loud shit and fun and sweat and like, just have a good time. Like, that's our medicine. That's our antidote. That's our thing that we need to do as creative people. Is always encourage the arts.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that moment when you hear the right song and the hairs stand up, that's apolitical. You know what I mean? That transcends all of it. When you get that moment, if you're in a crowd and you're feeling it, like we are talking about James Chance, you know, um, I don't know what the person next to me was thinking about politics that moment. All I know is everybody in that room was frozen and focused on James doing his thing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
what's important.
yeah. And I have my specifics that I remember. The first time I heard the Ramones was that the Stooges' first record, Suicide, Motorhead, and I'll throw in Sabbath.
Hmm.
Why, for me, why Sabbath was not as important, and I'll wind it out with this, is that, like, as a kid being from Jersey, and you're from Jersey, right? We're going to the Garden, we're seeing big shows. I'm going to like convention hall, I'm seeing shows, and like I'm like watching Kiss, and I love Ace and like all this stuff. It seems so far away, right? It seemed like that stage was distant, and I'm playing in backyards and I can barely play, right? Not that long, 2 years after that, 2 years after I start playing, I go to this place and you're playing pinball, and Didi Ramon puts his quarters on after you, right? And that stage is like right there. You
Hmm.
could step on it. It made it accessible. It made it real. And that's why bands like the Ramones and the Velvet Underground and all those bands and like the Cramps, the first time I heard the Cramps, I was like, it made everything so real, and everything just kind of went like that.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's the beauty of like the Brighton bars, even a kid from like, you know what I mean? It made it all real, and it made it all accessible to everybody. And the pipeline, you're in a place where you can get on that stage.
Yes. 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 You can talk to the band that just played.
Right. And
You can make friends.
you're the next one up.
Yes.
Made it, there can't be, and that was going on. That's why I love America so much, is that like that was going on in our country. And of course the UK, and of course you can go down. The UK had what went on there, definitely, and it was all kind of coincided. And then the other spots in Europe too, the Berlin stuff. But like really here, garage rock is from here. The
Mhm.
Velvet Underground is from here. The Stooges are from here. You know what I mean? The MC5 are American. Grand Funk Railroad. It's like I can go on and on and on about, like, that's why I love being from here and from our part of the world, because so many great things happened all throughout our Black Flag, Dead Kennedys, like Jello is one of my favorite people ever, there's just something about that guy. Like, when we were playing in Jello Biafra's, like standing in front of me at a little bar in San Francisco wearing a Blue Oyster Cult t-shirt. I'm like, I love this guy. He's fucking great. Like, I went to those shows as a teenager going, what the fuck is going on? So anyway, I can go on and on, but like there's something really special about that time and those people paving the way for everybody, especially with what's going on today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I agree 100%. One of the main reasons why I do this series on YouTube. Um, Big shout out to our buddy Drew Stone for making
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Well,
Thanks for the really great time with you, man.
yeah, likewise. I hope we can do it again sometime. It's been a real pleasure,
Anytime,
man.
hit me up. Stay in touch for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
I'm gonna get ready for Scott, Ruth, and Brandon right now and get some loud shit going on.
Awesome, man. Good luck with that. I can't wait to hear it.
I'll let you know when it's done.
Excellent, man. Thanks again.
Thank you.